everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Kelsey. I'm not an alcoholic. How is everybody? So most of you probably know me, and I'm assuming all of you know fabulous Jackie Park. But we are here tonight to discuss Jackie's book, The Podcast Handbook, Create It, Market It, Make It Great. Jackie is a communications wizard. She knows her stuff, and she was kind enough to put it all in this book so that you can know it too. One thing I really love about this book, you can see I've tabbed it and really gotten into it myself just as a podcast fan, not even as a creator, is it really is evergreen. You can pick it up, read a chapter, get something out of it, put it down, come back a week later, read another sentence, get something out of it. It really is, as the title says, a handbook. It's here for you, whatever stage you're at. This is the key you need to understand podcasts or even make your own. So without further ado, I just want to say thank you, Jackie, for sharing your knowledge with us. I'm really excited for a conversation this evening.
Thank you, and I just want to shout out Miss Allison,
Hi, Allison.
who was one of the editors for the book.
Great job, Allison.
And writer. Yeah.
Great job. So, Jackie, podcast handbook. What is a podcast?
Well, a podcast is one of the most misused term. A lot of people think it's video, but it's not. It's audio. It's actually an audio file, and it's something that you can download and share with other people. It's not video at all.
Okay. That's funny because I listen to a lot of podcasts that do have a video portion, but I never find them very good. I feel like it's a guy with a beard and a webcam, and it's just like, maybe I'd rather just listen to you. So I'm glad that the vibe is supposed to be just listening, because I think some people could learn a thing or two from that. They're not as pretty as they think.
And it's also very intimate, you know, because you're with this sound, you're this audio, whatever it is, music or true crime, whatever it is, you're with this, you know, this sound in an intimate place where you can listen wherever, whenever you want.
Yeah, and I think there is something different to it as well. You say with the sound, I think that's totally true. When you know it's just you and the mic, and you have to convey the story with just your voice, it is a little different than if you're leaning back on a couch having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different skill that I think is portrayed better in a podcast than just listening to like banter.
Yes.
Cool. So how did you get into podcasting?
Well, I had a sports entertainment magazine. It was online called Huddling with the Pros. Some of you guys might know. And what it did was it focused on the off-field, off-track, whatever, on sports. So we focused on, you know, like I don't know, Tony Stewart. We at the time a lot of people didn't know, and now they probably know. But he you know, brought up racehorses, greyhound racehorses, and things like that. So we focused on that. And then in, I guess about 2014, I wanted to reinvent it. I just had it in my blood. I wanted to reinvent it with the same core values. And unfortunately, storytelling is the way of the world now. Back then it wasn't, but now it's like part of our advertising, part of everything. So what I thought was unique back then is not unique now. So a coworker of mine I asked a coworker of mine if her sister, who was a litigation publicist, could, you know, help me out with, you know, do some publicity on this. And she said, you know what? I have a friend who does marketing.
Oh. So
let me, you know, I'll set up a meeting with you guys. And I did, and he said, Jackie, this is not unique, you know?
That's rough.
Yeah, he did. He said, this is not unique. Everybody's doing this a dime a dozen. Do yourself a favor and create a podcast. I'm like, a podcast? What the heck is a podcast? And he told me about Blog Talk Radio, and so that's when I did some research and
Got started. So you touched on a lot of really interesting things there about how storytelling is marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we live in a capitalist society. We can't go anywhere without being influenced by marketing. So That's a huge part of it. You talked about Blog Talk Radio, which is a tool that I don't know if everyone in here is familiar with, so why don't you explain that a little bit more?
So Blog Talk Radio is actually one of the, I think it's one of the best podcast platforms because it allows you to broadcast live.
Yeah.
And it also provides like numbers for people to dial in and things like that, but the problem is with broadcasts is that their customer service is horrible.
Oh gosh.
It is, but they know that they're one of the best, so they don't have to change, because they cater to their, you know, clients, like their celebrity
Yeah.
clients and things like that, so. And then you get these intrusive ads, which are terrible on
Not
your
fun.
site, so the more you subscribe, the more those intrusive ads disappear. And, but it's great because it allows people to, if you wanna do it live or even tape it, it allows people your guests to dial in, and they can actually listen to the show. It really
cool.
gives a professional, feel to it, but like I said, I had some great guests that they didn't, we had, you know, technical issues and it didn't end up recording, and when you try to reach them, there's this, you know, you have to fill out a form, and it was just ridiculous.
Yeah, customer service is tricky, but I
Yeah,
guess you touch on something there where it's like, it really is true. If you are the main guy in the market, or the main product in the market, you know, your customer service can be lackluster because people keep coming back anyway.
Yeah, and, you know, you can, from a legal standpoint too, you can, if you're the only game and, you know, you can set prices, you're right, and you can, you know, you monopolize the market, and, you know, people get screwed in the process.
Well, there's other tools out there, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's interesting to hear and the book goes into this in a lot of detail.
I'm not bashing it sounds like a bashing.
No, it's actually really cool
but
to dial in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a good, it's the only one that does that, so.
And that's good to know, because when I read the book, you mentioned that tool and a bunch of other alternatives. And, you know, it's good to know that there are alternatives, or the fact that you can have a podcast where people can dial in live. You know, I almost equate that to a radio show, but to know you can do that in a podcast setting is not something I think is really inherently obvious to a novice like myself. So for more info like that, or other platforms that you can host on, you gotta get a copy of the book. So in your book, you ask readers, why do you wanna start a podcast? And I think one answer to that is marketing, that we kind of already said. But why is it so important? You know, you ask that of your readers. Why is it so important that they ask themselves that and really spend some time considering that before they make the leap in getting started?
Like any business you start, you have to know your objective. You have to know your motivation. So it is important to know why you're starting this podcast. Is it, you know, just for a hobby? Is it to make money? Because that will determine the quality of the podcast. Because if you're trying to start something that is serious and you want to generate revenue, you're not going to, you know, set up something on the phone or some crazy microphone. You want to sound professional. You want to sound. You want to make sure the quality is pristine, and you want to make sure that your show is edited properly and all this. You know, that's important.
Yeah, you talk about that in the book too. Like, if you're going to go ahead and make it, and you want it to become something, you want to make great, as your subtitle suggests, you have to really commit. And it's hard to commit, like you're saying, if you don't have an objective lined out first. You know, you have to say, what am I even committing to? You know, you have to start with the end in mind. So that is definitely an important question for someone to get started. And then in the book, you have another question of, why is it important to define your audience? So you say, I want to make a podcast because of X, Y, and Z. I'm passionate about ABC topics that I want to bring to the world and maybe get some ad revenue while I'm there. But when you say bring it to the world, who is the world? Who is the audience? And how do you determine which, you know, niche you want to go for?
You have to know who your audience is. That's one of the most important things, because if you are trying to sell, I don't know, Barbie dolls, you're not going to, you know, market it to
Me.
millennials or, you know what I mean? So, so that's the thing, you need to know who your audience is, and you wanna meet them there. You wanna be able to, market to them and allow them to see what product you're getting, you're selling.
Right, yeah, and I mean, that touches on something we started this conversation with, which is podcasting is really used more and more as a marketing tool.
Yes.
So marketing, who are you trying to sell to and what is it, you have to know. Like, for example, I listen to a podcast that is only, you know, all natural beauty products, and the host is, you know, this adorable vegan girl that lives in California, but she's the right person to try to sell cruelty-free and vegan animal products. She's not out here trying to sell barbecue sauce in the South, right?
Exactly.
So it's all about what your vibe is, and you know, can be hard to define, and it can change over time. Almost like what you were saying before about evolving your sports talk radio from a kind of a blog to a podcast. You have to be able to adapt over time.
Yes.
Your audience can change.
Exactly.
And you have the tools to set those things in the book, you know, where to go for market research, right? How to make a pivot. These are all things you touch on in various chapters in the book, which is why I encourage everyone, you know, you're saying, okay, how do I set my audience? How do I market effectively? She tells you. So make sure you get a copy. All right, so once you've defined your audience, and this is something that you started to touch on before as well, you say, okay, I have my goal in mind, I know who my audience wants to be, how do I begin to record myself and get it out there? So what tools do you need to get started?
Okay, you need a good mic.
Yeah.
And mics are not even really that expensive. You can get
That's good to know.
like a toner mic for like $30, $40. You need to get, you need to know if you're going to have guests or you're gonna be the solo person, the lone host.
Right.
Because that would also determine how you pick your podcasting platform. So if you wanted a host and you wanted guests, like I would go with like a Zencaster, and then think about where I wanna place these audio files on, and maybe get a podcasting hosting platform. And then equipment, there are tools like talking points,
Nice.
you know, doing your outros, your intros, all these things. They're I don't know why my brain is going crazy right now, but there's talking points, there's prepared questions, there's a lot of things that you can do.
Right, and that's another good point that you brought up is your intro and outro. You do have a timeline down to the second of like how long your intro should take, how long introducing your guest should take, how long the conversation should take, how long an ad break should take. You literally have it broken out by minute in the book, and so I think that's really helpful, because sometimes I listen to podcasts and I feel like I'm listening to one person ramble the whole time. They're not even asking their guest any questions. Having an outline the way you present it, or even tweaking it slightly to fit someone's needs, is super helpful. And I don't think it's something people necessarily consider before they get started. So if you have the book, you can consider it and take notes.
But I do wanna make a point, like I was on LinkedIn, and
Yeah.
there was a former attorney that worked at my firm, and he had a podcast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was interesting, and I am like chatted him and say, God, just cut that intro.
Yeah.
Because the intro went on and on and on, and like, I would say a good, I mean, it sounds like it's short, but I would say a good 5-6 seconds. And I was like, oh my God, it was just terrible. It was terrible. And he lost
Wow.
me, he lost me.
Well,
I couldn't
yeah.
listen to it. And that's the thing, is that listeners listen for like the first
Right.
few seconds, and if they don't like it, they're gone.
Yeah, that's very true. You spend all that time defining your audience just to lose them in the first minute. That would be really disappointing. So
Yeah.
that's a good point. You might want to IM him that. He probably needs the
No,
help.
that's not my business.
Oh.
And we're LinkedIn. If he wants, I don't go after. If they want.
That's true. That's a good lifestyle choice.
Yeah, I'm not. But I came close. I was like, oh, dude, man.
Yeah, that's rough. It's gotta be rough trying to figure yourself out and start a podcast with a super long intro, but if he had the book, he would know better. So, sounds like you might have a few problems there, I don't know. Okay, so we talked about marketing a little bit, but beyond just an ad, why are podcasts essential tools for businesses?
Well, it allows you to gain a new audience. It's global. I mean, depending on what you're selling.
Right.
It's global. It also teaches. It's a great platform for, especially if you're in a big company, for your coworkers or your executives to learn about communication, and it's practice. It's great practice,
Right.
but
Yeah.
mostly you're in an intimate environment, and especially if it's great storytelling, people will follow you. They will engage with you, and you never know if it's great networking. I mean, for Hudlin, my podcast host was David Weinstein, and he's also a white-collar attorney in Miami,
Oh, wow.
a partner, and he, from Hudlin, we didn't have all this great listenership, but what we had was great, like Washington Post reporters, we had New York Times reporters, we had Wall Street Journal, we had, and all these people would invite him to, like if they're doing an article, they would invite him to contribute to the article. He's been on CNN, he's been
Wow.
on, yeah. So podcasts can do that for you. If you have good content, good guests, and you can network and get yourself out there.
Yeah, that sphere of influence is really important. Like the phrase is, a butterfly flaps its wings. Well, I'd argue a podcast is a lot more than a butterfly flapping its wings. So if you think that has influence, just imagine what it is to put your voice and your brand and your personality out there. Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's a great way to make connections, and if you are a business trying to market something, getting your product out there, maybe you're building that brand reputation to have more customers come to you than your competitor.
Absolutely.
So the reach is definitely there, and that's really interesting.
And it also builds loyal customers.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I would say the more they hear your name or feel as though they know you, that trust is there, and
Yeah.
that's what leads to loyalty time after time. It's tricky though, because sometimes I'm thinking of like industry specific stuff, like sometimes they can be a little dry, and you can be worried about
Like
going the other way.
Law firm, I mean,
Yeah.
I remember trying to sell it to my law firm, and one of the things that the partner said is like, Jackie, have you listened to the other law firms' podcasts? They are so boring. Not only that, the sound is terrible. I said, but
yikes.
I joked with them and I said, but they don't got me.
That's right.
And so we did 3 podcasts that he's like, you won me over.
Great.
Just because of the sound, the production, the storytelling, but it's easy because we also, we're a huge law firm, and we also have some great clients. Even our pro bono clients are amazing.
Wow.
So it sells itself, but it's internal, but I wish we would do it external, because even our attorneys are amazing.
Well, that's awesome for your law firm, but you say it sells itself. I don't think so. I think the skill sells itself, and if you want the skills, you gotta get the book.
Okay.
So, she has the skills. Did you hear what she said? She's able to launch 3 podcasts at the firm of a non-believer. If you're already a believer, you can get this book and learn the rest of the tricks. So we talked a lot about skill and the business aspect of things and the importance of quality and the right equipment. But now let's have a little more fun and talk about some of the most popular podcasts and why they're so successful and why they have such longevity.
Well, I think true crime,
Yeah, big one.
is a big one, and it's changing too.
Yeah.
Now, comedy is number one, because from the last time when we were at Barnes and Nobles, it was, history and, you know, it has changed now to, comedy is number one, music, business.
Yeah.
Podcast was 6, I couldn't believe it, and, true crime was in the top 5. But, yeah, and it all started with the case against Adnan Syed, which, he was just released, and I have my students listen to it, it is
Wow.
riveting. And, it's storytelling at its finest, it's using great ambient sound.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just incredible, and that's another thing, sound is, especially when you do storytelling, sound is amazing. And I think Morgan Stanley actually does it the best.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's another good example of a business podcast. So
Yeah,
that is
oh my God,
interesting.
they're selling you finance up the kazoo and you don't even know. You don't even realize it, you don't even realize it. It's just, you feel like you're listening to like a 60 minutes or something. It's
Right.
just so amazing.
Yeah, and that definitely is a skill to be able to, and I imagine it ties into the timing piece as well.
Mhm.
Because if they spend too long talking about something they're trying to sell you, you're gonna catch on.
Right,
But they weave it in with just enough timing and weave it back.
right.
So that's really interesting. That is a really good skill set to have and something to bring to the podcast. Another fun thing to bring to the podcast is cool guests.
Oh.
So you've had some very exciting guests on your myriad of podcasts over the years. Why don't you give us an example, drop a couple names of people that you've had.
Well, I think the biggest name, maybe more iconic, was the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and
Wow.
that was because
That is a name.
Yeah, that's because of the Super Bowl when it was in Atlanta, and there was a bit of controversy with the Kaepernick thing. I won't get into all the politics of it, but Kaepernick and then Gladys Knight, who, you know, and Atlanta is like the cradle of the civil rights movement, and so all this controversy was going on, and we reached out, well, I reached out to everybody, Reverend Butts, I mean, everybody that I could, and to my surprise, Jesse Jackson, he said yes. And
Cool.
but the problem was when we got him on the show, he didn't want to talk about his friend Gladys, but he did want to talk about Colin Kaepernick. So and it was the craziest thing because my podcast host David was so, now he wasn't in awe because he's a trial lawyer, but he was, you know, he wasn't asking, he was being too polite. And I'm like texting, ask him about
Go for
Gladys,
it.
ask
Yeah.
him about Gladys, you gotta do it. And then he was just so, but finally we got through it. In fact, the USA Today reporter was on listening, because we did it through Blog Talk, so he was able to listen to the
Wow.
interview, and he was like, wow, this was so incredible. But even though he was dodging the questions about,
I can imagine that is tricky, trying to get your guests to stay on topic.
yeah, he just wanted to talk about Kaepernick, but
Wow.
yeah, but the whole thing was Gladys, which was interesting.
That is really interesting, and it's really great that you were able to use your influence to get out there. You know, I use the phrase a lot, casting a wide net, but it's true, because you didn't know you were gonna reel that fish in.
No.
And look at you go.
Yeah, and we've had New York Giants.
Wow.
We've had some pretty big names on it, in terms of reporters from ESPN and, yeah, we've had some good.
And I think that's really encouraging for someone that's looking to start, because maybe you think, I need funding, I need a big name, who wants to talk to me? But you can just build your skill set and the work speaks for itself and people will come to you.
Well, I think because of who we, also too, it is who you know and
Yeah.
friends that you have. And I did have a 5-time Super Bowl champion as one of my hosts too.
There you go.
Yes, so
That
that was
helps.
helpful.
That helps.
He was actually one of my first guests, so they saw,
Oh,
oh,
wow.
if he comes on, then maybe.
Floodgates open.
Yes, but
Yeah.
if you don't have that connection, it's about your content. So if you have good content, people will support you.
Yeah.
Because when I started huddling as a online sports, I had no one. I had no content. I mean, no contact, but because it was so unique,
They caught
and
on.
yeah, NFL, Major League Baseball, all of everyone just flocked to me and supported it because
Wow.
the content was good, and that's how I met and to this day still have friends from back there in the sports industry. So they were able to
That's
support
incredible.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the power of networking. That's a really cool
Mhm.
story. That's awesome. So this is the last question we had prepared, but what message did you want to leave your readers once they finish your book?
I always say satisfaction. I want them to be able to read the book and from soup to nuts, be able to start their podcast and not be intimidated and be educated on it, because I also feel that people think that they can start a podcast, oh, I'm gonna start a podcast, and just boom, and not knowing that it's a lot more strategic and a lot more involved.
Yeah, there's something to be said about learning as you go, but you don't have to learn as you go on your own, right? We all know you can have Jackie right by your side the whole time. So, Jackie, amazing conversation. Anything else you want to leave the crew with before I open it up to questions?
No, thank you for coming.
Thank you, and thanks to the Nanuet Library for having us. Yes. Does anyone have any questions for Jackie? Yes, Dad?
How do you have to juggle like legalities, like talking about a legal case maybe, or something in the news, like a hot topic?
That's
that you
actually a
wanna
good
go
question.
to, you know?
When there's a conflict, if you're talking like if my firm, because there's a lot
Privacy.
that my firm represent, and there's some that David's firm represent. So, there are things where, especially if my firm is representing, it's only public. We only discuss public. We don't, because I am privy to things that I see that's written, I'm like, oh, that's not right. But I can't say anything, I can't do that. I just have to, report public and same with him. Never anything privileged.
Yeah, there's a different face you might have to put on for when you're in the boardroom versus on the mic.
Right,
So-
and as far as covering like legal,
Like,
content,
yeah.
It's good that David has that. He has that background. And that's what a lot of the reporters and the guests love about him, because he does have that background and he brings a different perspective.
It's good insights make for interesting content.
Mhm.
So, there you go. Well, solid question, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? Oh, yeah, we have one there.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Tanya.
So I have a couple of businesses. I have a couple of businesses and I want to use podcasting to market the event and kind of build our audience. One company is a travel company, and then another company is a event planning lifestyle company. So I have partners, and we want to do a podcast again to build our following. And so what's the frequency of a podcast? Is it 30 minutes, once a month, once a week? Or you kind of say?
It depends on how much content you have, but for me, I mean, personally, I would not do a podcast more than like 30 minutes.
Okay.
Like you mentioned your travel, I would definitely think about, your clients and try to, create some storytelling behind it and really, discuss, whatever it is that you wanna discuss, but really the base of it should be storytelling. But I would do it like, your time, because if you're going to set out and you're gonna promise people that you wanna do it 5 days a week and you only do it 2 days a week, that's not good. So I would start like once a week,
Okay.
a half an hour, that's what I would do.
And is it possible to, because it's 3 of us and we're in 3 different locations, is it possible
Oh, yeah,
for
we
us
did,
to
I
do
was
it?
in New York,
Okay.
David was in Miami, I had a New York Times, reporter broadcasting from Turkey,
Oh, wow.
Okay.
yeah, so you can
Okay.
do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say as long as everyone's mics are working, have at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Wi-Fi.
Yes, very important.
Yeah.
That's a 50-50 shot for me, I don't know about you all, is the Wi-Fi. All right, one more question?
Yeah, well, how do you come up with content if you're doing something week after week? Like, what are some ways to like find new ideas to get that like fresh content flowing?
That's a good question. It depends on what you're doing, like news, if you're doing sports, it was really easy for me to get, because thank God for the NFL, because they were, every week they were, whether it was the drugs, whether it was rape, whether it was this, whether it was that. And then, you know, it's great to, New York Times, just read, research, Wall Street Journal, you know, just Google News. That's what I did. I would always research like Google News. You'd be surprised some of the craziest stories that are not told that you can find somewhere down the line in you know, in the feed.
Or even in, like, if your podcast has a website to go along with it, having a submission form. Like, I listened to one podcast that's only about missing people, and she has a whole section of her website where people can write in and say, I haven't seen my brother since the 70s, and she'll write a whole thing about it.
Yeah,
So, They'll let the content come to you, is another idea I had.
yeah, and they do, you know,
Yeah.
when you establish yourself, like we would always get publicists or, people calling us and saying, oh, can we be on your show, or, you know,
Yeah.
and some were pretty big names, and I'm like, wow.
That's so
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, so,
Very well, cool. Thank you everyone for coming. Really, really glad you came in the rain. We appreciate it. And, you know, holidays are here. There's a stack of books over there. You know, get one for your friends. Thank you.